Hi everyone. So today I'll do kind of a new tag. It is the top 10 Uni Press and Classics book tag. So when I first thought of this tag, I was only going to include university press nonfiction books. And I read a lot of nonfiction, and I actually had a hard time coming up with a list of my 10 favorite books. I actually don't read enough university press nonfiction books to easily make a top 10 list. So I expanded my list to include university press books that I want to read, that are at the top of my list of wishing to read. And I included translated classics that I have read and that I want to read. So between those 4 criteria, it was quite easy for me to come up with a list of 10. So in this tag, at the beginning I'll show my university press books, and the last 5 will be translated classics that I want to read. And then at the very end of this video I'll show you my final list of 10 books, because I'm also going to show you a book and books that are related to that one book, which is just a good excuse to show, like, I don't know, 15 books. So the first one is this amazing atlas, New Atlas of World History, Global Events at a Glance by John Haywood, and it's Princeton University Press. I actually went through the library. I borrowed as many history atlas books that I could possibly find, and this is the one that I decided to purchase because I only wanted to purchase one. And this one, I think it is amazing for showing the whole entire planet and all the rise and falls of all the empires throughout all of the history of the planet, and it's amazing. So you can see how the planet changes, and I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but I definitely want to. I have referred to it quite a bit, but it is amazing. So that would be number 1. Number 2 would be The World's Writing Systems by Peter T. Daniels and William Bright. This one is amazing if you're interested in languages. It covers the world's, all of the writing systems. It gives a little history of them and some really interesting things about the language it's talking about. From this one book, it just bloomed into a whole bunch of different books and reading projects and everything just from that one. So this is a related book to that one. This is by Harvard University Press, but it's Belknap, the publishing house. This is the history of the Latin language, and it just talks about the influence the Latin language had on the world at the time, how it exists still today, its impact today, just the whole history of a language. And then connected to those 2 books are these 2. Philology, this one I want to read. It's by Princeton University Press. It is just basically the history of language and literature and how they're connected with each other. And this one is Decolonizing Poetics and Indigenous Literatures. This is by the University of Regina Press. So these 2 are because of the world's writing systems and just my interest in linguistics. So these would be 2 for my TBR. And then my top 3, I guess, would be A New History of Western Philosophy by Anthony Kenny by Oxford University Press, and I just love how comprehensive this one is. It goes into great detail for a whole history of philosophy and the context that the books were published in. It is great for just exploring an overview of Western philosophy, and from there deciding which specific books you want to read. That would be a custom tailored list for you. I want to read these 5 books of Western philosophy, and that would be a really good book for that, because you get to read the whole discipline of the whole entire field, right? So then I guess my 1, 2, 3, this would be 4 and 5 of my favorite University Press books. The Indian Philosophy Source Book and the Source Book of Chinese Philosophy, both of them published by Princeton University Press. They do the same thing that Western philosophy does, but for these 2 philosophy traditions. They are also amazing for just getting the bird's eye view of everything to do with these 2 philosophies. And from there you can build your own custom TBR list that's more fine-tuned towards your own interests. They give us very brief profile, and they give you some small little samples of the different philosophy books that they discuss. So because I'm interested in, again, going back to the world's writing systems, it started my age writing project. One of the books that I'd have to choose for a favorite for this one, for my translated classics that I have read, would be the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings by Ferdowsi. This one blends history, mythology, and just the lineage of the different kings of Persia. And I think it's absolutely amazing. If you really, really want to get into the history of Persia, this would be an absolute must read. Also, when Ferdowsi, when he wrote this, he was trying to preserve the Persian language from the neighboring Arabic influence. And so when he composed this poem, he used only pure Persian words. He didn't use any single words from Arabic, which I think is amazing. But this one, it is 900 pages. It's a very comprehensive history, so it's probably not for everyone. So a good alternative to that would be these two much more accessible, smaller, easier to read books. The Conference of the Bird by Farid Din Attar. This one is very, very accessible. It's basically it's poetry, but it's I would say it's a really good intro to poetry because it blends different faiths, the Judeo-Christian and the Muslim faith all together. So there's it's like a crossroads between those three. It has a lot of parables and like fun stories and stuff. The philosophy seems very simple, which is something that we can just universally understand, but it's actually very, very complex the more and more you get into it. This one I have not read, so this would be on my TBR. It's Tales of Marvelous and News of the Strange. It's a medieval Arab fantasy collection. This is the first time that many of these stories have been translated into English, and they're just medieval Arabic fantasy stories, so I definitely want to read this at some point. So those all came from my world's writing systems and getting into Middle Eastern, Arabic, Persian poetry and stuff like that. So they're not in my top University Press translated classics. Well, they are top favorites. Anyways, without getting too complicated. So The Tale of Heike, this one is by Viking Press. Translated by Royal Tyler. Definitely want to read this one at the end of the year. This is the kind of unabridged Tale of Heike, which would be the fall of the Japanese samurai. It's also kind of an extension from my Ancient Global Epics reading project, but I definitely want to read that one. That would be at the very top of my want to read translated classics. And Terra Nostra, also at the top of my want to read translated classics, by Carlos Fuentes. He blends the history of Spain and the New World and the Old World with mythology, philosophy, all kinds of stuff. And he just blends them all together into this one non-linear story. Apparently it's quite difficult to read because he blends so many different elements into just one single book, but I definitely want to read it. So it's one heck of a chunkster. I think it's about 800 pages, 900 pages. So definitely want to read. And then Faust, well, part 1 and 2. This is getting into German literature, which I definitely want to explore. This is published by Princeton University Press. This would definitely be a top University Press book for me. And the next German writer that I want to explore is Schiller. I want to explore his poetry and his poems. His work, for some reason, is really difficult to find it translated in English. There's no good English volume of his work, which I think is really tragic, because I flipped through Schiller's work at the University Library, and he's an amazing poet. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful. So Goethe, he wrote about everything under the sun. He wrote about basically every discipline that he could find. And it is also very difficult to find Faust part 1 and 2 in a single volume, so this is a really good one to go with. It's translated by Stuart Atkins. His language is absolutely beautiful, and because I was so floored by how powerful this one is, I had to purchase my next Uni Press TBR book by Princeton University. This is Goethe, Essential Goethe, edited by Matthew Bell, and it includes, this is basically a condensed version of 12 volumes of Goethe's work, but they condensed it into one single volume. So it includes his poetry, his early plays. It has Faust Part 1 only, but a different translation than the one that I have, so it'll be good to compare them. And then Willem Meister's Apprenticeship. This is like an early, like a cornerstone for the novel, for how I guess the novel takes the modern day shape, after Don Quixote, of course. That would be the earliest one, but this could be the beginning of the modern day novel. Then it's about almost 200 pages, so it's quite a lengthy novel as well. And then his Italian journey, which I guess is like a travelogue of him traveling throughout Germany. And because he wrote about basically everything, there's a pretty generous little selection on his nonfiction writing, which would be on literature and art, which I'm guessing is like a literary criticism, on philosophy and science, the metamorphosis of plants, and I want to read all of his theory of light. I want to read that one unabridged at some point. And philosophy and science, the influence of modern philosophy. He just wrote about everything that he could write about. So my top 10 list would be, okay, so number 1 is my atlas. That would be TBR. Number 2, World's Writing Systems. Number 3, Indian Philosophy. 4, Chinese Philosophy Sourcebook. A New History of Western Philosophy would be 5. 6 would be Terra Nostra, TBR. 7, Tale of Heike, TBR. 8, Decolonizing Poetics of Indigenous Literatures. Philology. Faust 1 and 2. Maybe for TBR, Essential Goethe. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this would be 10. So that's my condensed list, and I hope you enjoyed this tag, so feel free to go ahead and do this. And that's all. Thanks for listening. Bye everyone.